Hello there. You know, every time I sit down for a video, I don't know what people think is on the screen in front of me, but usually there's never more than 2 or 3 or 4 sentences, and the rest of it I've got in my head. That's how some people are always reading from a script. They just repeat the stuff that they've written, or probably what somebody else has written, but yeah, keep it simple. Simplicity is divinity. Exactly like natura naturans. Natura naturans is a fancy way of saying Mother Nature. I've made all sorts of humorous allusions and allegories for Mother Nature, and that certainly is not necessary this time. I'd actually like to be serious. And by the way, on learning about nature from the best sources, and I wished I had more Latin. I've only had a couple, well, 2.5 years of Latin. Latin is pretty decent, a lot better than most people's, but there's not a whole lot that's intelligent that's written in Latin. There's De Divina Proportione, Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis, and the Periphysian. Periphysians by John Scotus Regina, The Division of Nature, was actually inspired by a pseudo-Dionysius. I don't know if you know who that is, but you can certainly look it up. And there's collections translated in English of pseudo-Dionysius. You know, pseudo, of course, means fake, or the false Dionysius. And this is an established historical fact. However, when it pertains to wisdom, there's no such thing as fake as long as the actual truth in the center holds. If the center holds and it's wise, then it doesn't matter who wrote it. Pseudo-Dionysius is a reference to the person that wrote it, but it was not actually Dionysius. So I've been asked that question many, countless times. I'd like to define one of the, it depends on what you count. Really there's only one, but 4 ultimate aspects of Mother Nature, and I'd actually like to mention those 4. Aristos dias, pressure mediation, proportionality, and conjugate fields. And Mother Nature, as I've said, doesn't have a slide rule or a calculator. There's a huge difference, too, between math and arithmetic. And now, for someone that was schooled in Western schools, they think they're the same thing, but they're not. Many countless professors and academics and others will point to, you know, this quasi-correct premise that the Platonists, Pythagoreans were interested in math. They were in the periphery of symbolic representation, which is all math is. These are symbolic representations of higher things, which contain with them order that is to be illuminated through arithmetic. But arithmetic is the higher. The math is the symbolic. You know, a tomato has a certain proportionality in geometry, for example, or like an apple does. Yeah, there are any countless millions of things in nature. The actual symbolic representation of that proportionality would be mathematics, but the actual proportionality itself, which is direct and immediate to the essa, or the thing in itself, is the arithmetic. So the Pythagoreans, the Platonists, and Aristotle, and others were not interested in math. They were interested in the arithmetic. The representation of it, of course, is mathematical, but this is the distinction between math and arithmetic. Anyway, Mother Nature doesn't have a calculator or a slide rule. She's only interested in pressure mediation. The entire universe operates off of pressure mediation. It's the same reason why there's no straight lines in the universe. Everything in the universe is not a thing in itself. It is tethered in some fashion to something else. No straight lines in the universe, which means everything is curvilinear. Yeah? You reach a broken nautilus shell. You can imagine what it looked like before it was broken. They had that nice little thin piece sticking out there, which broke off somehow, some way. Here's a perfect example of Mother Nature's pressure mediation. Everybody loves to talk about golden ratio, and of course they don't know what they're talking about. So what does golden ratio mean? You know, what is the principles behind it? Well, I don't know. You know, it's like beauty in nature. Well, descriptively that's accurate, but that doesn't tell you what something is. You could say a horse is elegant and fast, and it's great for getting yourself from point A to point B for much of a human history, but that doesn't tell you the essence of what a horse is. And people love to talk about vortexes and golden ratios, but they can't actually tell you what they're representations of. And this, of course, once again, is math, not arithmetic. What the golden ratio is the proportionality of the one to its attribute and the manifestation thereof, because phi is to 1 as 1 is to phi. Mother Nature only works in pressure mediation. First principle of Mother Nature is the eoristos dias, also too called by the Greeks tolma or anarche. Anarche is loosely and crudely translated as necessity, but what it really means is it can't be any other way. People try to figure out the great mysteries of cosmic mechanics and Mother Nature, and it ultimately comes to a barrier which cannot be pierced through either wisdom, insight, or intelligence especially. And the reason for that is it cannot be any other way. It must necessitatively be that way. But the indefinite dyad or incommensurability is a proportionality of one to itself. The eoristos dias is the second one, which is not a second one. They're both one thing. Principle and attribute. The second one in the Fibonacci sequence, which starts at 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, so on and so forth. But the first two digits are 1 and 1. Now the one, undeniably so, is the agathon, the absolute, or Pali the word would be Brahman. The second one is not something different, or an additional one or absolute. It is the extrinsic attribute. That which the good is that which the good does. It would be the same distinction between light and illumination, which are not two different things. One is principle and one is attribute. They are an inseparable holos. Like holography. I don't know if you know how holography works. You have a reference beam and an incident beam, and they actually manifest three-dimensionality and proportionality in something that does not have it within itself, only through the multiplicative and perfect harmony of itself in relationship to itself. That's a really hard thing to understand, but it's actually divinely simple. I know that bends a lot of people's minds up, but it shouldn't, and I'm certainly not trying to. Understanding it is a whole lot more simplex than it is the mental agitation people actually apply to try to figure that out. So the one and one in sequence are principle and attribute. So that's the first of the four ultimate principles of Mother Nature, or cosmic mechanics on a whole. Pressure mediation. Pressure mediation, because Mother Nature mediates everything out through pressure. Everything in nature, including human emotions, everything is pressure mediation. The flow of water, the magnetic against the dielectric, the gravitational against the force in motion. Absolutely everything is pressure mediation. From the highest to the lowest, absolutely everything is pressure mediation. The so-called speed of light, which is not a speed, which implies something is moving, is the rate of induction of the hysteresis of the ether against itself, because it has a transverse phenomenal aspect in the coaxial circuit of the nature of light. This means the maximum rate of propagation. Nikola Tesla, for example, said that light can be nothing other than a sound wave in the ether. Well, like sound, just like light, is not an emission. Nothing emits sound. Speed of sound. Everybody knows about speed of sound. Breaking the sound barrier. What that is the maximum rate of propagation. The actual speed of sound changes depending on the temperature and density of the air, actually, because that's all sound is, right? When I'm talking, I'm not emitting anything. I'm creating a disturbance in the medium, that being the air. This is exactly what light is. And importantly so, and please hold on to yourself and really understand the importance of this. Importantly so, since light, exactly as Nikola Tesla said, no different than sound. Sound is not an emission, and neither is light. That being so, this means all the countless preconceptions, ideas that all these academicians hold about light. Speed, it's an emission. It's electromagnetic wave particle duality. It's photons. It has the speed of light. It's emission. All of those things necessitatively are therefore undeniably untrue. Absolutely everything that academia currently holds and cherishes about their understanding of light, and by the way, by their own admission, everything about quantum is based, their words, not mine, upon, all of quantum is based upon our understanding of what light is and how it works. Well, everything they understand about light is incorrect. Isn't that interesting how that works? That's A leads to B leads to C. So pressure mediation, number 2. Number 3, proportionality. and proportionality that leads to harmony. When you have proportionality, you can have harmonic interference, either constructive or destructive. Yes? Just like you see underneath the supercell or the ferrocell, of which I've made 1,000 videos on that little device. Everywhere you see the absence of light, yeah, we're seeing destructive interference. Everywhere you see light, we're seeing constructive interference. Everywhere we see the absence of light, by the way, we're looking at the dielectric. Everywhere we see light, we're seeing constructive interference, but the constructive interference is the magnetic field. The loss of energy or inertia makes manifest the light. At those lines, lines in nature, this is where the supposed lines of nature, and people talk about, what's a field? Well, it's lines of force. Well, lines are not things. Lines are descriptors of what is seen by human beings, ignorant human beings no less. So the proportionality, and the proportionality that leads to harmony. But the harmony of what and what? Because harmony is not a thing, as people think. This is harmony, it's beautiful, it's got, like this sand dollar here, which I've actually drawn the proportionality, perfect proportionality on the back of it, right? It's harmony. Notice the harmony of what and what? It's the harmony of the principle and the attribute in manifestation. Technically, it's three things in the case of things manifest. Spirit and matter. These are two different things. What is life? Life is the perfect harmony and proportionality of spirit and matter. Undeniable absolute of the entire universe. What is life? The perfect proportionality between matter and spirit. But you can't take matter and spirit and put them together without a third thing. By the way, Plato said this and Pythagoras said this. What is that third thing? Necessitatively, that which conjoins matter and spirit must necessitatively be something else. It would be the medium. And the medium, to get matter and spirit, two things that are diametrically opposed, to come together, must be a third thing. What would it be? It would have to necessitatively, there's that word again, necessitatively. In Greek, the word is ananke. Have to be necessitatively something of itself, of perfect incommensurability from every angle it is viewed or conceived. And what would that thing be? What is required for spirit and matter to come together to create life? Last I recall, it was wet, and human bodies were made up of almost entirely this stuff, without which human beings are just a pile of dust. What would it be? No life without water. I have the water molecule tattooed right here on the back of my hand. It's the interior is painted in green, not painted, tattooed in green right there. This is the 115 isosceles triangle of the Pythagoreans. Now, and this is not my opinion, this is a hardcore fact. Yeah. What you say, well, I've never seen that triangle before or mention of it. You've heard of the Pythagorean pentagram? Well, the Pythagorean pentagram is the same triangle in triplicate overlaid over top of each other, which makes a pentagram. Yeah, there's just three of those that actually make up a pentagram. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. You notice the number 4 is absent. 4 is the number for time, right, by the way. Time is not a thing, it's only a measure. That's every ancient culture said time was the number 4. I've said this in many countless videos. Mother Nature didn't create time. Time is the necessitative manifestation of the measure of masses and magnitudes, by the way, in case you were wondering. So, the harmony of what and what. Spirit and matter require a third thing. That third thing must necessitatively have... I could talk about this special isosceles triangle for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. It's literally the closest thing to geometric magic. It's the only perfect geometry in the entire universe, by the way. The only one. No other geometry has been proposed or said or drawn or mentioned that has absolute, perfect incommensurability and proportionality and harmony within it. Isn't it neat that this special geometry, which is the water molecule, is the interlocutor between spirit and matter for life to exist? You think that's a coincidence? If you think it's a coincidence, then you're not too bright, because it's not a coincidence. So, Water itself contains a geometry of perfection and the ratio of divine proportionality. By divine, I mean ultimate perfection, top to bottom, left to right, up to down, inside and out. There's really nothing we could point to in the entire cosmos that has that. Nothing. The Greeks called this yugata. There's the reason I have the Greek letters right by here. It says yugata right here in the upper portion of my knuckles right there. Yugata. Yeah? Take a long time to explain that one. Don't need to get into that. So that's the third one. The first was the Euristos Dias, which is also too called Tolma Nanake. The second is pressure mediation. The third is perfect proportionality, which leads to harmony. But harmony of what and what else? And in the case of life, spirit and matter requires a third thing, that being water. So we have the three things so far. The fourth thing, the plane of inertia, or the conjugate fields, excuse me. Talk about the conjugate fields, I'd like to briefly return to perfect proportionality. The plane of inertia is perfect harmony and proportionality. You actually have the magnetic toroidal field superimposed of the hyperboloid, which is the hourglass shape. There's a conjugate geometry of the entire universe, specifically the geometry of inertia and acceleration, centripetal convergence, the dielectric. It's directed towards counter space, directed towards the ether, and the other one is directed towards the creation of space, the volume inside the donut of the torus, i.e. centrifugal force and motion. This is the centrifugal force motion of magnetism. Specifically have the dielectric and the magnetic, the two conjugate geometries of the entire universe. There's only those two because electricity is the hybrid of both. Phi times psi equals Q implied of electrification. And gravity is nothing other than non-point source mutual mass acceleration towards counter space. No different than so-called electrostatic cling or dielectric acceleration. Also too, an acceleration towards counter space. Everything in the universe is force and motion, inertia and acceleration, either centripetal convergence or centrifugal divergence, excuse me. My throat's a little dry. I should have brought some water out here. No. All life, by the way, exists on the plane of inertia. Most life exists on the plane of inertia of the Earth. The Earth exists at the plane of inertia relative to the Sun and our spiral arm galaxy, the Milky Way. Everything exists at a plane of inertia relative to this nearly invisible toroidal bubble that our galactic galaxy sits in. And there's a reason why it sits here. This would be the plane of inertia. Out here would be the centrifugal force and motion vectors of the toroidal geometry of magnetism, and superimposed over top of that would be the hyperboloidal geometry. Why is the plane of inertia where all life exists in the perfect harmony and divine proportionality between the magnetic and the dielectric, respectively the geometries of the toroid and the hyperboloid? Because this is the lowest pressure mediation harmony between the centrifugal divergent magnetic and the centripetal convergence increasing inertia and acceleration towards counter space. And then if you turn the sand dollar over here, we'd have this counterspatial null point right here. Okay? Of course, that's where the sand dollar is, where it actually takes the nutrients into its little body. It's neat actually picking up living sand dollars on the beach. I used to do that. You dig your hand a little bit into the sand, you'd feel this weird, freaky, spiny creature. You peel it up, and it's like, oh, that's a sand dollar, it's a living sand dollar. So it sits as the lowest pressure mediation between both the magnetic and the dielectric geometries. So we've gone from the Euristos Dias, pressure mediation, and proportionality. The third and last one, of course, is that conjugate field. That conjugate field of the magnetic and the dielectric. And all of these things are just one and the same thing. These four attributes of the entire universe, or natura naturans and Mother Nature, are not four different things. They're one thing, and one thing only, just like a coin. There's not two sides of a coin. There's just the silver of the coinage. Speaking of the Euristos Dias, pressure mediation, proportionality and the harmony that leads to the consubstantiality of two or more things, in the case of spirit and matter, the third interlocutor of which makes life possible, that being water. And the conjugate fields, these four things are one thing and one thing only. The absolute irreducible simplicity of nature is perfection and simplicity, because simplicity is divinity. Superficially, even if one were to understand these four things in their complete and entirety, You cannot say that these are different things from each other. You can't say a head of a coin is different from the tail of a coin. You know, spatially, that's only technically correct. It was on the other side. It's got a different face on it. Yeah, but it's all the same silver. It's one and the same thing. You're just looking at something from a different attribute and a different descriptor with different operating attributional qualities. So Mother Nature really is that, you know, dreadlock, hemp skirt, muddy feet, hippie chick with, you know, it's really that simple. The Euristos Dias is pressure mediation. Pressure mediation is the Euristos Dias. All of these things working in conjunction with one another is harmony, is the perfect proportionality of the absolute and its extrinsic attribute. Light and illumination. The good and what the good does, however, is an appropriate word. This is the Euristos Dias. This is the conjugate fields. Because there's only two fields in the entire universe, the magnetic and the dielectric. But magnetism is the dielectric field. It's just like talking about the coin again. You have the head side of a coin and a tail side. Yeah, but the tail side is the head side with an attributional quality, qualifier. Magnetism is the dielectric field, by the way. Loss of energy or inertia of the dielectric manifests the three-dimensional force vector that is the creation of the toroidal geometry of the magnetic field. But magnetism and dielectricity are not two different things. Neither is ice and water two different things. Well, ice is hard and cold, and water is wet and not so cold. Well, yeah, but it's still water. It's the same thing. These four attributes or qualifiers of natura naturans are all one and the same thing. Yet these four qualities of one holos are simplicity in the absolute extreme, above all simplicities that this earth has ever seen or has ever been witnessed by any human being. It takes wisdom and insight to see these things, these four things. It takes greater wisdom to see how they're all one and the same thing. Because they are, undeniably so. People love to talk about the golden ratio. The golden ratio is just a harmony, a perfect, incommensurability between the one and its extrinsic attribute. I actually had 4 different ways I was going to phrase that, and I chose the best one. That was the reason for the pause there. It's so perfect. But all the words and all the lip-flapping blather, people sit there flap their lips endlessly. It isn't going to help anybody see it unless they want to see it and they desire to see it. And they strive to see it. And by see it, I mean comprehend it. The plane of inertia is really, really simple. Explaining it is quite difficult because you have to work up a chain of steps. You know, you're standing on the pinnacle of a high tower or something. You know, no words are needed to look out on the landscape at the beauty. No words will suffice. You have to get somebody to that tower head where you can look out at the beautiful landscape that don't require words. You know, you have to take step A, step B, all these steps to go up the spiral to see something that no longer requires instructions and words. Just absolute, awe-inspiring simplicity. But this is what Mother Nature is. These 4 primary pillars that hold up all of nature that are not 4, they're one and the same thing. People don't know these 4, and worse still, they don't know how these 4 are one thing. At least most people don't. Nearly nobody does. But nothing is known except in the modality of the knower. We could express things differently, but you know, the simplicity of what has been said here cannot be denied. And that's really important, and the implications thereof are even more important. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. If you do, any donations warmly welcome. You can tell me how much you didn't like it. I don't see how, unless it was just, of course, my squeaky voice or my fat, ugly, tattooed face, you know, which is understandable. Thanks for watching.